can, if you want. Yes, we will ask. Yeah. So everybody, thanks for the people who stayed for the 3 workshops the whole afternoon. This is the 3rd workshop of the School of Data Journalism by the European Journalism Center and the Open Knowledge Foundation, and hosted by the International Journalism Festival here in Perugia. We will have now a great training session by Mariana Santos about interactive storytelling. Mariana is, or was with ICFJ, was a fellow with ICFJ, embedded at in the great newsroom of La Nación in Costa Rica, and she's now in transition to another fellowship with the JSK fellowship. Is that right? So a great workshop in perspective. So I will leave Mariana start right now. I just remind you, for those who haven't yet, register on datajournalismschool.net to get all the information about the workshops. We will email that to you afterwards if you register. And don't hesitate to share your impressions and what you learn on social media using the hashtag DDJSchool, as well as the other usual festival hashtags. Thanks, Mariana. I bring you a microphone.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, thank you guys for being here after such a long day. I hope I can entertain you and do not make you sleep. Thank you, School of Data, for bringing me here. It's an honor and a pleasure, and I'm so amazed to have these many people listen to me. So I was asked to run a session of 1.5 hours of visual or interactive storytelling, and to be honest with you, my goal is that you all create something, and at the end of the day we have something to publish. But to be fair, 1.5 hours is a bit short, so I'm gonna run through lots of material. Hopefully you're gonna get super injected and inspired, and I'm going to tell you about the process of animation and visual storytelling using After Effects. And thank you so much. Hello. And then, okay, hello, okay. And then I will tell you about my experience both at The Guardian, where I used to work for the last 3 years. This last year, I've been a fellow, like he said, and I still am for the next couple of months. I finished my fellowship. Then, after this, I'm going to Fusion. It's a new TV channel in Miami that belongs to Univision, and I'm gonna start a team of interactive visual storytelling, not only for TV but for online. So the news that go on TV, they're usually linear and they die after you show them once or twice. And the goal is, how can we repurpose these contents online and make it for users to keep on using and make it longer tail. So, can I have the presentation, please? The slides. I have a lot to tell you. Can I have the slides, please? Bambini, ragazzo. Pode andare lo slide, porfa. Grazie. Okay, it worked. So yeah, the last 3 years, I was an interactive designer at The Guardian, working with amazing developers. That they did all the magic, to be honest and fair. I love The Guardian. It's still my favorite newspaper. And, we have a chance to have very, very skilled developers and journalists. So the way it works is, okay, this is our newsroom. And it's quite beautiful. It's in the center of London, in King's Cross. It's 7 floors, but The Guardian occupies 4 floors. The first floor is like communications, admin, other projects The Guardian has, like The Guardian Jobs, Soulmate, which is one of the products that most money makes to The Guardian, which is to make couples meet online. Hopefully with the willing that you're going to find someone as clever as you that reads The Guardian. So that's like the selling point, and it's actually very profitable. And everything started when I first joined. This was my boss, called Alistair Dent, and I call him the visionary because he was, in my opinion, the one person that was driving The Guardian forward. He was really trying new technologies, new approaches, and pushing the entire team, not only the interactive team. So when I joined, it was just me and him trying to visualize databases such as WikiLeaks. That was our first project. And imagine, it was my first time in a newsroom because I was coming from advertisement. And he told me, okay, we're going to work on a project. It's very secretive. Do not tell this to anyone. And then I saw some doors with top secret, do not enter. And this Assange was walking around, but I didn't know him by the time. And I was like, oh my God, these guys are so like hysterical. So I called my mom in Portugal, because I'm Portuguese. Mommy, I'm working on this project they call WikiLeaks. I don't even know what this is. And my mom, what? Shut up, you cannot talk about that. Okay, then I realized I had to be quiet, and that was like a special story. And it was like my kicking start, so I learned like the hard way. So after that project, we were kind of fighting or a battle between us, the New York Times, and Decides. We all had the access to the same data, and we had to show it and tell the story the best way possible. So it was like a, let's say, friendly combat of who would do it best. And after that project, I got asked to stay, and of course, that was my dream job, and I said yes. And then the team back in 2013 was like this. We hired 3 more developers, and we hired a journalist from the Times that was both a journalist, but he knew a lot, and he still does, about coding. And there's a question that says, should all journalists know about coding? I think the direct answer is no. They do not need to code, but they do need to know what code can make for them. So they can work with developers and have the ability to ask the developers to do certain things, such as some projects I'm going to show you. So this is the way we work. I understand that not every newsroom in the world has the chance to have a multidisciplinary team, but have a team of designers and a team of journalists and eventually admin people that usually are in another building and do not get involved in storytelling. So The Guardian really invests in trying to recruit developers who have a storytelling will and goal, and like they do development but with the will to tell a story with data. So it's very hard to find these people, but they are out there. And with organizations such as Hacks and Hackers and other meetups that try to combine journalists and developers, this currency starts to be more happening in more number. So let me tell you about a couple of projects. Maybe you know some of them. So the government cuts, it was a big data set, and we had to visualize it. And in London, we have the chance to have a government which actually recruits all the developers from The Guardian. So the government of London has many amazing developers, and they build websites to show data, to open data, and to make it available for everybody. But what happens is that if I'm a user and I want to know more about the cuts on the budget, I'm going to this site, I can download all the PDFs, but what am I going to see? What story does it tell me? Like if I'm not a data analyst or a data expert, this is going to be full numbers and tables, quite boring and heavy. I'm not going to be able to extract the story as I would like. So I think this is the main role of journalists and designers and developers. It's how can we tell these big sets of data into stories that people that are not experts in data can still understand. This, for example, was our approach to these PDFs. So this is exactly the same content, and we divided the content in categories and subcategories. So there's like the Department of Work and Pension that has smaller departments. Here we have a overall picture, and this is something The Guardian loves. So we see that actually the blues and the reds are the ones that have the most money, and we see the small ones here that have less money to them. The pros and cons of this. Okay, the pro is that we can have this overall picture, and the con is that we cannot actually develop further information if we are interested in these bits. And this is what print can do for you. Some people have criticized this project from being infostatic, because the human brain can better understand the size of a bar than the diameter of a circumference of a circle. But okay, if we would show this data in pure bars, not so many people would share it, not so many people would feel excited about, let's say. This project was the most shared project at the time, And even the government of UK printed this out very big and they put it in their wall, just so they can see the overall picture. Okay, I'm missing a bit of getting more in-depth information. So how can we take this idea further? Because every year we have this issue, the cuts. So that's when another team comes. So this first project was made by the graphics team. The Guardian has 3 main teams of graphics. The graphic design team, which do breaking news. So the typical, the news, the reporter comes from the 2nd floor, goes 3rd floor, comes to design and say, please, you have 2 hours to do a graphic to go with this story. This is the typical thing. And they do it. Of course, this one was not made in 2 hours, a bit more. And then we have other things like, okay, we have 3 to 5 days to do a kind of story that is like actual, that is going to prolong along the week. Can we do something more in depth? And then there's the second team of designers, which is from 8 to 10 designers. They're called the design team. And they do everything for the web. Buttons, looks, titles. When we need sponsorship, banners, and special feature pages, etc., they do everything. And they are involved with some design for apps as well. So here we try to tag along that exact issue, which is how can we get more in-depth information about a certain category or subcategory that we want to reach. This is like the Matryoshkas dolls of Russia, you know, you open one and there's another. So this is how it works. You click on a very big category and it explodes into small subcategories that belong there, and you can have extra information. This project was made using HTML5 and JavaScript, and it was made in 3 days by a designer that has coding skills. And then with another year, and we took this further away, people would say, oh, this Osborne, he does so bad cuts, he doesn't know how to run the country, he's cutting the money where we most need it. And the Guardian is very keen to listen to people's opinion, because it's like, the motto is like, comments for free, comments are free, and that's why the Guardian is open as well. If we ask people to comment on our articles, how can we sell them the content? So if comment is free, do your own cut and share it. So if Osborne was that bad, this is your opportunity to do a better job. So again, from the same project, from the same PDFs, with all the data, we would allow you to come to the category you want and to cut in the subcategories you want, giving you an overall view of what the budget is divided on. So you would do your cuts in the places where you think you don't need so much money. And of course, this differs. If you have old family members, maybe you want some money for the pensions. If you have kids, you want money for education, etc. If you don't have any of those, or well, your cuts would be according to your needs. So it was interesting to see the articles written under this as a comments. Most of the times, the most interesting, and of course you could share with your name, the most interesting parts of some stories are the comments and the discussion people take it, because they take it to another level, and it's very interesting. So I think visual data visualization is a way to invite people to get more immersed in the data and be part of the story, be part of the discussion, because this is important information that are being open, like in other themes as well, that we need to address this to get closer to the audience. Civic journalism. For me, this is a very interesting point, and in this festival it has been talked about a lot, how to manage social media, how to understand social media in the anthropologic point of view, because we all have opinions, we all like to share, but just because we have the channels open for communication, it doesn't mean that population, especially those who are not journalists, will tell the truth and will check their facts if the sources are correct. So a couple of years ago, we had this it was quite impressive in London. I was living there, and I'm Portuguese, so I never had any, before I never have any access with riots or disturbs or very serious issues on the city. And back then, I was at the office, and we heard from Twitter that people were putting fire on buildings and our cars out of the blue. They start communicating with BlackBerry, saying, let's go to the street, let's start disturbing and doing riots. Actually, back then there was an issue that should they address BlackBerry from not having tell the authorities that this was going to happen. And then actually people started putting fire on cars, on buildings, on companies, and the information on Twitter just raised very, very, very high. So the Twitter was like pumping London riots. And we at the newspaper were following Twitter, like, shall I go home? Can I go home? Because it was near our homes, and most of us go to work by bike, and we would have to pass by fires. And then stories such as the rioters went to the zoo and they opened a cage of the tiger, and now there's a tiger in the streets, and they would name your streets, and you would be like, what, really? And then people would be like, okay, show me some proofs. And then a person would tweet a picture of a tiger in the street, and in the middle of the euphoria and the fear and the stress, people would just, it's true, there's a tiger, you know. But the tiger actually was from Italy. Many years ago, there was a tiger in the street, and that picture is revealed from that news. Then other stories like, for instance, Paul Lewis was trying to manage the tweets and retweeting what he confirmed was true. And we couldn't just, as a newspaper, we couldn't just retweet everybody. And it showed to be very hard to report on this theme using civic journalism, like people that would just tweet using the hashtag London riots or the places where the riots were happening. So what Simon Rogers did, and he used to run the data blog of The Guardian, now he's at Twitter, I think he's going to be here Friday, he decided, okay, there's always this theme. When we do a project, if we ask users to sign in to The Guardian, we make a barrier of, so if there are 100 people that want to post something, if we ask them to log in, maybe 40 people would do something. And we know this is a barrier. We have to make our users not to think and not to do extra work and not to click more than they need. But here actually it was in our favor, because we wanted people to tell us what's happening in their streets, but committing, like if they're gonna tell us something and if they have to do login, they're gonna invest time, because we're gonna request them to do so. So we start asking people, tell me where you are by geolocated points, and tell me, write a couple of lines of what's happening if you have pictures even where. So after checking if those facts were true, we start pointing them out, and this is totally automatic using Google Maps. It's a very easy way to, with a form, you ask people and then you have to confirm before you allow it to be posted, but this was very easy to do. And then at the third day, we had lots of content. We created a database fed by the users that we decided to showcase on trails of destruction around London. And this was interesting because this was made by people, by civic journalists. Then what we did, I'm gonna have a film. What we did was, okay, we want to do a study about this. And this was not breaking news at all. I don't know if this is gonna have sound. This was, let's study what just happened in London. This time was the best, the far away, the most tweeted event in London. And we wanted to study this in an anthropologic way, and it was like a couple of months after the riots happened. And at the same time, we were in contact with the University of St. Andrews, and they wanted to study the sentiment analysis of a tweet. Let's say, if you tell me the London riots, the rioters went to the zoo and opened the cage to the tiger, and there's a tiger in the street. And if I reply to you, yeah, right, the sentiment analysis will see, yeah, positive, right, it's positive. So it will say plus, plus, it's plus, I'm agreeing with you. And actually, I'm not agreeing with you. I'm being ironic, and I'm using senses of human language that are telling that I do not agree with you and I want some proofs. So this sentiment analysis algorithm totally failed, and we failed with the project, and then we had to do everything by hand. Let me see if I can play this video. Do I have sound? This is not my sound.
The England riots were the worst bout of civil unrest in a generation. Thousands of people took to the streets in towns and cities. The fires, looting, and clashes with police gave the impression of a country at war with itself.
And one big tenet of this project was to look at social media, and particularly Twitter. We wanted to ask the question, how was Twitter used during the riots? The riots were arguably the most tweeted event in the UK at that point. Many people had experienced the riots through a lens of Twitter,
Our challenge was to find a way to show the birth and death of rumours on Twitter. In other words, to give a sense of how misinformation corrects itself in an open, unregulated forum such as Twitter. The result is one of the most ambitious pieces we have ever built, both in terms of data analysis and dynamic graphics. Our source material was a corpus of 2.6 million tweets provided by Twitter, which related to the riots by virtue of a series of hashtags. We identified 7 key rumours, ranging from the frivolous, that army tanks had been deployed in the City of London, to the more sobering, that the Tottenham riots began with the police beating a 16-year-old girl.
The key inspiration was actually fluorescent microscopy, which is a scientific method that helps us to understand cellular phenomenon, puts things under a microscope, colours them either red or green to show you how they change over time.
We decided to show tweets as circles grouped into larger circles. Each larger circle contained a set of tweets that were all retweets of a given tweet, effectively votes in favour of or against a particular rumour. The sizes of the circles varied according to how many followers the author had. With help from an interdisciplinary team of researchers at the universities of Manchester, St Andrews and Leicester, we distilled the overall corpus down to a series of subsets related to each rumour.
One of the technical challenges that we had to overcome was to analyze the relationships between different tweets, which ones were retweets of earlier ones. And that involves a number of different comparisons to be made between these tweets. Because it's 2.5 million, that is quite a significant number.
Each tweet was then independently coded by 3 sociology PhD students in order to establish whether it supported, opposed, queried or commented on a rumour. The animated graphics are produced using web standards, which means they work across many devices in multiple browsers. A graph of tweet volume over time, for instance, is drawn in SVG or VML, depending on browser capability.
So this was a study on the relations of people on Twitter, and it was used, as he was saying, HTML, JavaScript, and tried to work in all devices. So it was kind of a challenge in terms of technology. It took more than 4 weeks to build, and it was a test drive to go if we see collaboration. Of course, it's very hard to teach in a workshop how to do this because you need people that have skilled development skills, and the time we have is not enough. But I wanted to show you like what can be done. Then, for example, this is an animation. Now this is driving to the part that I really want to talk to you about, because this is something we could do if we would have 4 hours. We could all do an animation like this. This is a new trend, let's say, for the last 3-4 years. When I first did this project was in 2010, to be honest, was when I first joined The Guardian. I came from animation background, and Simon Rogers, again, he gave me this data set and he said, look, can you do something, visualize this data that is quite boring? And I tried to do this with the art director, Michael Robinson, and when I finished, I presented it to our executive director, editor, and he said, okay, it's okay, I kind of like it, but we never published something like this, so I'm not going to put this live, as I don't know how our audience is going to react, so no, we're not going to publish. And I was like so sad, because like I was totally sure that this is a good way to present something, either a bit dull or boring, or even too complex to invest so much time if you don't know if you want to read that, for instance. And after a couple of months, the New York Times started producing animations, and that same person said, Mariana, can you do once a week one of these, because the clicks and the viewers just blown. It's really, really effective with the audience. And I said, okay, 1 week is too much. Like, I need a team at least to do once a week, but I can do once every 2 or 3 weeks. Anyway, I started doing lots of animations like this with the other themes, like the crisis, the riots, whatever theme, actually sports, arts, culture. So it was proven that this had more clicks than a piece. Even we did once which was Boris dancing Gangnam Style, you know that music, and it took me like literally 15 minutes to produce an animation, and it was the most clicked project ever. But of course that was a joke, and we don't want to do journalism just like that. But this was proven to be very effective because first, I didn't need to debug, and we do not need to debug, which is the thing that takes lots of time. You produce an animation having a script, usually written by a journalist, about a certain theme, and then you collaborate, journalist and a designer or an animator or an illustrator, to come up with the visuals for that story. And that's how it all began. And then I was getting scripts from all over the newsroom, and they would sit with me, they would give me a couple of weeks, and they would say, okay, this is the story. How can we visualize? And most often than not, I would ask them their opinion and ask, how can we visualize it? So that's my workshop. It's to tell you how you can produce these animations. This is very not complicated. You have to believe in that. Of course, it takes a bit of time to learn After Effects, which is the main animation tool I use. It's an Adobe program, but the main thing is that if you are a journalist and you want to have your stories being told in an animation way, and if you have a chance to work with a designer, I'm sure you can co-work with a designer because he would know Adobe anyway, and the Adobe programs are very similar. So here's the workshop. And then I have a couple of examples as well. So first of all, and I will pass this presentation to Milena, and then you can have it if you want. The main thing to touch first thing is, who are you talking to? Because I've done animations about crisis, about politics, or about culture, or about gifts for Christmas, the most various things you can imagine. And we need to know who are we addressing. The same with our chronics, the same with our reports. Animation goes on your mobile, goes on your iPad, on desktop, on a click. It is not meant to replace the story, especially because it's meant to be short, fast, and kind of a teaser to invite audience to read further or to learn more about this story. So it's not replacing. This is very important to know. Then the script presentation. Usually, and every time I do an animation for a journalist, he comes up with a novel, you know, lots and lots of text. That to animate this text, it's going to take ages. So we have to reduce the story and the script to the minimal barrel essentials. Imagine what I usually say is, try to write a script that you can read in 1.5 minutes when you read out loud and you record the timing in your phone. And if that happens, we are good to go. Usually they take like 6, 7, 5 to upwards minutes. And it's proven after like tons of animations that people, and this number has been decreasing. So a couple of years ago, after 1 minute and 30, people would close the window. No matter if the animation was 30 minutes or 5 minutes, they would close after 1:30. Like 80% of the viewers would close the window. So why should we do animations of 3, 5, 10 minutes? It's not the purpose. If we want to do a longer version, that's a short film or there's a documentary. There's a different medium. So this is the story. This is the bullet points that I'm most interested and concerned on telling you about. And then if you want to know more, read the story or check our infographic or explore the data. Then another thing, think with images. Text is good for us to go in deep, to learn our information in deep, but the first touch, it has to be visual. Because especially, imagine, our personas are like those that go from home to work on a bus or on a public transport, and they just want to get so they wake up, first thing they do, it's catch the phone, maybe check some apps that tell you the biggest stories of that day. This is our audience, and we want to be in that feed of the best stories. So if there is a big story that had lots of investigation, we want to be there featured as a small movie that just catch your attention. This is what you're going to learn if you read the story or if you get immersed. So this is where we want to be. So start thinking with images. I know for journalists, sometimes it's hard, this part, because they want designers to think in images and they think in words. But if you start trying to do that exercise, it's incredible, it's powerful. Like, I had the chance to work with very good investigative journalists. I would never thought they would give me their time on thinking with imagery, and they did, and sitting side by side, like, I think with images, and they think with words. So when we combine, we have so many different approaches, and this is very complex, and it's really engaging to see the differences and find out what's the best for our audience. So allow yourself to think with images. And then another thing, journalists say, I cannot draw, most of them. Yes, you can. And you can do these balls with a stick and 2 sticks, and it's a sticky man. You can. This is a representation. And some designers say the closest path to your mind is your hand. So your hand connects to your brain, and you can produce much better than just say, you know, I want you to do something like that, just draw it. And it's much more effective. And then be organized. Like, I am the first not being so organized, but with these workshops, and when people work together, this is very important. You have folders for everything, for the script, for the assets, which are usually the images you're going to use. Then you have the voiceover, which you can record yourself. I'm going to tell you how. And then you have different versions of the animation, and then you have the final animation. You need to have a project manager. Even if you are working with another designer, one of you guys have to be the project manager. You have to be responsible for the conclusion of the project, for, okay, we have the deadline, we're going to meet it no matter what, even if you can sleep the last couple of days, and that happens most of the times. I just like to say this, when people say, is journalism dying because of the internet is killing journalism? I don't think so. I think it's the opposite, especially with these open channels of communication. I think journalists and the practice of journalism is more important than ever. Now that everybody can speak out loud, now that all voices can be heard, now that the internet is full of information over and over coming, even if it's 5% that is worth checking and the rest is like spam, journalists have this role of making sure that the information that goes live is real and it's confirmed. So I think just the future is digital, as well as Martin Barum. I just think journalism is stronger and in need more than ever. So I mentioned these timings. We should not go too much more than 1.5 minutes if you don't want to waste your time, because if you are going to create something more, nobody, I mean, a very small percentage is going to read. Just those, in my case, my friends and my family, are those who are really, really interested in knowing everything about that theme. A general audience would close because they want more stimulations in a shorter period of time. Voiceover. So this is everything we could do here today, if time would allow. But SoundCloud teamed up with this software called PCM Recorder. And this is very easy to use. This is what the Guardian Multimedia uses when they do interviews in the street. They record the interviews. This is much powerful than your own single microphone in your smartphone. So for this, you just start here, and it grabs the environment sound, and then you wait 5 seconds, and then you press the green, and you start talking. Either if it's an interview in the street, or a concert, or whatever, I use it for voiceover. So I go into onto a closed room with not so much noise. Usually I go with the journalist, and the journalist reads out loud his script. I never do, because I never worked in Portuguese. I always have been working in English or Spanish, and both of them are not my mother language, so I would not be a good voiceover. Especially because you need to be an actor narrating. It might sound dull, especially for journalists. And I have this funny story. I was once doing it was a political review, and I did an animation about it. And then the project manager told me, can you record the voice of this editor, because he's very famous and it's gonna be much better to have his own voice in his own words and story. I said, okay. We went into the multimedia room, and first I was quite new at the company, so I didn't know everybody. And I did this stupid question, do you work here? And he was like, what? He was like there for 20 years, one of the most known journalists in the field. And me, like a brand new intern, didn't know him. But I was like, okay, can you please read this with attitude? Like if you are an actor, if you are reading something sad, you cannot laugh, of course. That's not the point, but you cannot read like this, otherwise it's gonna be very boring. And that was the way he would do it. And trying to make a senior person, editor, push his boundaries, it was so hard, because he was like, girl, don't make me look funny. I don't want to look funny. I want to look serious. This is a serious team. At the end of the story, the the script was amazing, the story was visual attractive, the voiceover was so dull that the project failed totally. So this is very important to take in mind. So resources for journalists that say they don't know how to draw. This project, the non-project, was a hackathon made by Chris Wu with a bunch of designers and journalists saying, we're going to do a hackathon without computer. This is about drawing by hand. So when we say, can you draw me a tree? A person from the Alps will draw a tree different from a person from Brazil, for instance, or from Costa Rica. So that was like designing by hand, how you imagine a tree. And then, of course, designers would convert these into vectors, just so you can use this information, these icons, not only in your stories, as well as in your animations, infographics, etc. The way it works, it's free. You can have a paid account if you want, without crediting anyone. And if you want to have a free account, you can download all of the icons. You just have to credit them at the end, saying, this is from the non-project, and this was designed by John Smith, for instance. And that's it. Even if you are doing an animation, you can pass it very fast. Just as a kind of kindness. Nobody's going to check if you credit or not. It's a kind of a kindness. Another way to find your information is dafont.com. This is a site to download fonts. Most of them are for free. Actually, everything is for free. Some are for only personal use. But this is A, B, C, D, E, F, but they are called, they are icons inside of letters. So when you open them in Adobe Illustrator, you can convert them to a JPEG or a PNG. They come in SVG, which is, or actually they come in a font and you can convert them to SVG or to Adobe Illustrator, which is what we use to do animations. So again, you can find all your icons here. In Dingbats, there's a part there that says Dingbats, and there's, among fonts, you have these icons. This is very, very cool, and this is what I wanted to test with you. But I see most of people don't have a computer. But this is a very cool tool. Do I have internet here? This is called Storyboard That. Let me see if I have internet. Do you have the... it's open? Is it? Okay, just showing you how easy it is. It's resolving host. Is this open? Ah. Thanks. Continue. Okay, check this out. This is for journalists to communicate with designers in a very effective way when you have something in your mind that you want to pass. If you don't want to draw, you can use this software, if the internet allows me. Yeah, it's resolving. Okay, otherwise I will leave it to explore, but I wanted to show you how easy it is. Okay, so create a storyboard. This is free as well. Maybe we are all online, that's why it's a bit slow. I think I pass. And you can try this. It's just you can drag and drop backgrounds, people, text. You can do a storyboard with these features, and you don't have to even draw. They draw everything for you. I think I'm going to pass because it's taking too long, and I have lots of things to tell you. So this is the software used. It's actually paid software. Okay, Adobe Illustrator. There are some open software for vectorial, like GIMP and some others. After Effects I still haven't seen. I know that Infogram are coming up with a new tool for doing video on demand in the future. But so far I do everything using this software. And this is something, if you would like, in 4 hours we could get the basics of this software and you could build your own animation. And this is what I've been trying to do in newsrooms in Latin America. Then after the voiceover, you can as well have some music banks where you can download music for free, such as Jamendo, Free Play Music, Audio Jungle. You can make it happy, sad, upbeat, cinematic, etc. You find lots of tools and resources. The same way you find in the Font and Noun project, you find free soundtracks here. Again, I'm going to pass this presentation. I'm going to tweet it or pass it to Milena. And tutorials. This is how I learned After Effects, and nowadays I'm a professional on animation. Everything I learned, I didn't go to school to learn this. And I think most of the skills, we can grab it by ourselves. Like, we have the access to the internet, and nowadays there are lots of people very generous, sharing what they know, and doing you step by step. Even if we start from scratch, we can find all the small steps. And my first job on my life was a motion designer at Universal Music. I started as a graphic designer to make the covers of the CDs, and I found that to be so boring. And my boss was doing animation for music stars on TV, and I loved that. And he said, okay, if you really want to do this, take these DVDs. And he gave me DVDs with tutorials. Learn it. And this is a project from Mariah Carey. Do it. You have 4 weeks. And I said, oh my God, I don't know how to do it, but I really wanted to grab the opportunity. So, okay, this is like more advanced tutorials, but learning these tutorials and having a project that I could actually produce really launched my wheeling, and I didn't sleep most of the time. I gave up on sleep to be able to catch up with this technology, and it works. And if you devote like 2 or 3 hours per day, I tell you, in a week, you can start producing something. And if you do these intensive workshops we do in 4 hours, you can start produce something. And then if you want to be a kick-ass animator, you have advanced classes here, and these are all free. So no excuses. Let me show you an example of a project that I've been working on. And this is to tell you how possible it is. So the entire year, I've been working in different Latin American newsrooms from Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, etc. And they all share the same thing. They want to learn. They want to catch up. They see Europe and the United States as, when we grow up, we want to be like them. But actually, they can be like us right now. They have the skills, they have the hands, and they have the minds and the ideas, and most of all, they have the articles. They have amazing corruption, that they do outstanding investigations, and then they have a problem how to communicate this visually. Like, they usually do big text formats, and they need to catch up with online. So how can they do that? So my fellowship, International Center for Journalists, sent me out to work with these newsrooms, trying to do what I was doing at The Guardian. So La Tercera, for instance, it's a newspaper that did not do teamwork, and I tried to go there and implement that with them. This guy is called Miguel Paz. He launched a project called Poderopedia. It's a platform to match relationships between politicians and business people and people with power and money, which often can be pointed out of being involved in corruption cases. And he's trying to map it out. He started in Chile, now he's in Venezuela, Panama, soon in Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, etc. So the overall goal is to map the entire corruption scene, or the possible corrupt people. So he put, and this is all about connections. So he knew the scenery of newsrooms in Chile, and he suggested me as a fellow to work in the Tercera newspaper. I must say, most of the Latin American newsrooms I found, they were extremely humble. But humble to the point of saying, we would like to do this, but we can't. They cut themselves. Like, before starting, they're already quitting. And I really didn't like that, because, and this was they got me a meeting, let's say what this girl has to say, but actually, you know what? Look at this guy. This is the designer. He's like, what am I doing here? I'm going to waste my time. I'm not going to do anything, you know? The goal was, we have a big story, which is the 40 years of coup d'etat in Chile. How can we tell this story? So they call me and let's do this amazing. The goals was we want to do a snowfall, or we want to do this guardian firestorm thing. They like these forms of narratives, but they said we would love one day in our lives to have the chance of learning how to do it, but we don't know and we're not going to be able to do. And I was like, yes, you can. And I say that not because I coded these projects, but because I've been involved in the process, so I know how it takes and who it takes and what technology. And this is what we need to be familiar with. It doesn't mean that we all need to code, but we need to know how to make these projects and then work with the persons that, like developers that know how to do HTML and JavaScript, etc. And so we can write a narrative to fit that technology. So, when plans fail. So I was all positive, this is going to be like at The Guardian, everybody does their thing, and actually they don't. So first of all, we were counting on this amazing journalist. He's like the most famous journalist in Chile about the coup d'etat. He's so famous that he now left the paper, his office at the paper, and he built an entire building of consultancy. And he's a writer. He writes lots of books, and he's named as the master of the coup d'etat. He knows all the secrets, and he's still investigating after 40 years. And you know what? He doesn't have Twitter, for instance, and we said, why don't you have Twitter? Because I know there's lots of people hating me, and they're going to talk bad about me in Twitter, so I'd rather not see it. This is his attitude towards digital. And so we were asking, okay, the plan would be, because they are very focused on print, they said, let's do a 21 days before the coup d'etat, the preparation, what happened, etc., for print, and that was an excuse for me to be working with them in digital. Actually, our hidden plan is that we wanted to do something very big in digital, and we would do eventually something for print just to please the managerial levels, which was what they most wanted. So we were there, we asked the guy, can you write the story? He's like, yeah, in 2 days I give you the story. Okay, I was there for 1 month. The 2 days passed. And then we were like, okay, 1 more day, 3 days, 4 days. I lost 1 week without the script. So we called him, we said, can we have a meeting again? He said, okay. So he came 1 hour late. He left us waiting 1 hour late. This is how different it is from London. And then when he came, we were talking about, so can you give us the script when you're going to give us? And he was like very relaxed. And he said, you know what? I didn't even start it. And when I started, I'm going to give you this 1 week before the actually launching of the project. And we were like, what? This was the face of the girl. She was like, I want to kill this guy. Because he really didn't respect us, didn't respect the team. Like me, as a Portuguese, I wanted to say everything that came in my mind. And I was like, I swallowed the frog because I was not in my place. I should shut up. And then, okay, this was no time to waste. We have to put hands on work. What's our plan B? We have no turning back. So what happens is that she went, she had like 5 interns. They went through all the investigations about the coup d'etat to try to find out what's news stories. Like, because after 40 years to tell the same story is quite hard. And the goal was, we want to do a snowfall, but we have no idea. And I said, let's do a snowfall. Let's take this project that's most likely is going to fail because we already had this big issue of not having the story. Let's take this as an exercise. Don't forget about the final product. Let's exercise ourselves to work together. What do you like to do more? So we tried to get the best of everyone. So having this chance of let's do whatever we can, these guys showed us, I love illustrations, I love collage, I love to do artistic stuff. Okay, let's grab that. So they were so like humble, and in the sense, the designers would walk in the newsroom like this. They don't have any freedom to tell their ideas, to share their goals and dreams. They don't have. It's really oppressive, that environment. So let's do design thinking in team. And this was the first thing we did. That. So this girl, Macarena, she did the script with her interns. In 1 day, she did the first 2 hours of the day before the bombing. And so we reduced the scope because of the limitations we had. It was our plan B. Instead of 21 days, we're going to have 24 hours before the bombing. So we start designing those 2 hours of script that actually were like 10 pages. So this was the beginning, 10 pages, 2 hours. We start imagining how Snowfall would work, even though they don't know HTML. They start imagining how things would come into the screen. So, and they start becoming very creative. they had freedom in that room to think and to dream whatever they wanted. And they start drawing and planning, and discussing happened. For the first time, they were allowed to discuss ideas and different points of view. And it's very nice Chilean discussion. Two designers, no, actually 3 designers. And they had different opinions, and that was very nice to see that for the first time they had the chance to share ideas and not be oppressed. And then I asked them, at the last day I was there, they asked me, can you do a pitch of your work and to the journalists? So we had a room similar like this, and I asked the guys the night before, look, whatever we conclude these 3 weeks of work, can you do a pitch to show, because we had this problem. In terms of political issues, we had to make sure we would say the same number of times we would say Pinochet, we would say Allende. And who's the bad, who's the good, depends on who's reading it. So it's very sensible theme. We were very close from not having this published. So they were afraid because the theme was very sensible. They were afraid because the journalists usually do not let them think. And they were trying something totally out of their comfort zone, which they were not sure if this was the good path. So they did a pitch for the first time. So they start showing the process, so the storyboard, a little bit more hand-drawn. And then I tell you, the guy that came into the stage to present, he came like this. I'm sorry, guys. I know this is not complete. Please forgive us. Like this, totally saying forgiveness, asking for forgiveness. This is a sketch, and this is what they produced. In like a couple of hours, they put this together.
El GAP Hugo García contesta el teléfono en la casa presidencial de Tomás Moro. La gravedad del mensaje lo lleva a despertar al presidente Salvador Allende, quien contesta la llamada. Es el subdirector de Carabineros, Jorge Urrutia. Acaba de recibir inquietantes noticias desde Valparaíso. La infantería de Marina está en las calles y ha comenzado a tomar posiciones de combate. Efectivamente, a la hora que el presidente Allende es alertado, y tal como estaba previsto, el golpe de Estado ya ha comenzado en el principal puerto del país. A poco más de 100 kilómetros de Santiago, pronto, Valparaíso y sus alrededores caen bajo el control de los hombres del almirante José Toribio Merino, principal organizador de la azonada IX.
Well, this was what they put together in a couple of hours before the meeting. At this time, the journalists start applauding them out of nothing, and like it was a big moment. Maybe for us, in our reality, this doesn't mean anything because we have freedom of speech and we can share our ideas, but they couldn't. And this was a proof for them as, okay, we can think by ourselves as well. So then they kept on going. I did project manager over Skype because this was the first time they were working together. For them it was hard to find if they were in a good path or not. And okay, this is funny. And to explain that we can actually do managing by Skype, and it works if we have clear directions and the goal where we want to get. And then they got so confident, they start developing and that for me was the best part, is that they gain self-confidence in their work. So they start designing, and as you can think, taking the best out of people. This guy is an amazing illustrator, and we tried to empower that from him. And because he was so passionate about drawing, these things came naturally. He was zero under pressure. He was in his comfort zone, doing something out of his comfort zone. So it was a combination. And as that was like one of my main goals on trying to experiment with their visual heritage, I think this was a cool project for them to put in practice what they know. So, and then they didn't know how to do stuff like a snowfall, but then out of settle, they learned how to do an iPad version by themselves, by reading tutorials and watching movies. And they developed, like this was just before, a couple of weeks before the launch. So a couple of weeks before the launch, they changed management. And they changed to a team that didn't care about this story, that said, we're not going to publish, we don't care about this. And the tone, we want to defend the part, and this is not defending. Anyway, I flew myself there, and I was so afraid they wouldn't publish, because that would ruin all the work these guys put together, and the confidence they gain will be destroyed. So I called the Guardian and I said, look, there's this project made by this team. The project is amazing. Can you please publish? Check if you like it, of course. And if you like it, please publish. We give you all the content and credits and everything, and you publish. The Guardian loved it, and they got pissed with me because I didn't tell in the first day. I just told in the last moment, because they could have a better way of using the coding here. Like the Chilean team decided to do a loading everything before you start the experience, and that requires 2 minutes waiting, and the Guardian cannot tolerate that. So the Guardian could have make a consultancy kind of thing, helping them to use PHP or other languages to make this load as you go along the page. So the Guardian published. I as well, other fellows asked another paper to publish. So at the end of the day, La Tercera had to publish as well. Otherwise, it would be very embarrassing. The reaction was like amazing. They never had worked together, and they loved it. Like, and under certain stress situations, if you can rely on your colleagues and you know they're going to do the best, you can do your work the best way you can without having to micromanage everybody. And this was what happened. And then, of course, we had lots of team spirit, and they said, after this, we're going to do more together. And this is the project. But because the internet is kind of failing, let me see if I can. So they end up doing it in Spanish and English. Okay, it's going to take ages. But if you have the chance to check this project, it's called 11 September 1973.latercera.com and /s or /en for English. And I think that's all for now. Yes, that's all for now. I don't know if I have any questions or if you can run through any software you'd like me to drive you through. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast, but I wanted to tell you all this, and I had more to tell you. But I think this is a proof that, yes, we can. And Latin American newsrooms are very eager to catch up with technology, to catch up with storytelling. And they are open to these kind of workshops and work together for a month and then go on by yourself. And they've been doing amazing projects. I have like tons more that I could show. But due to the limited time, I welcome you to write me, and I can send you lots of links about the projects that have been developed there. And I think they managed to arrive to the same level of a snowfall, but with their own style, which I think it's amazing to be able to use your own style and your heritage. Is there any question or anything you want to say? Say again? Yes, I will give the slide to Milena, and she will send to you or tweet. You get everything.
So you work for The Guardian, and can you tell us what were the main feedback that you received from your work? And do you think that these kind of models can work in Italy?
You mean when I was working at The Guardian?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, it's a bit the situation of Italy. I know you have crisis, and so do we in London, or do they in London? Do we in Portugal? The thing is, like, there was a big investment from the Guardian newspaper to be digital first and most of all mobile first. And the goal was to be disruptive with the technology. Like, they would allow us, so my team would be the third team. We would be from 5 to 7 people. And we would be asked to do non-breaking news that would be totally disruptive, and that would be serving not so much as, okay, we're going to have lots of users coming to see this piece, because it was pretty targeting to audiences who are very keen to browse data, interested in technology, and it's a minority, to be honest. And the time and money it requires, it's pretty high. So it's not an investment that can be done by any newspaper. I believe the newspapers in Italy are not like partying on money. So it's not only trying to reach out for a future of technology, but as well as a public relation movement. Because when we do such projects, it's not that we're going to have lots of clicks or lots of viewers. It's that people are going to talk about The Guardian through these projects. The same way Snowfall, it's a brand for New York Times. If you don't know, maybe some people don't know New York Times and they know the Snowfall project. So it's a driving, and the money, so the way we calculate, it's the metrics, it's the money we would invest in advertisement, the same way we are mentioned with these kind of projects, would be much higher. So it's an investment not only to try out technology, that then we can have the code in GitHub and have it used by other teams, but as well public relation for the world, to spread the word, The Guardian, and this is the project, and then try to get some prizes, because that's as well very good for reputation. So I believe not so many newspapers are in this position. The New York Times, for instance, they have a team of 40 to do what we were trying to do with 5 or 7 people. In the US, there are 4 people doing the same. So we do much less projects, but we still invest in these, it's like top techie projects. There is this gentleman here in the 3rd row. Now I can show you the project.
You know what? You are at the top of the pyramid, and of course all of this is really interesting. But when you're talking about snowfalls and you're making a kind of comparison with what happened at La Tercera, I have the impression that you're giving a message like you can do it, even though you don't have a big team or stuff like this. You know, that's quite difficult because everyone is dealing with this kind of revolution, also the local newspapers. So everyone is trying to find its way. At the basic level of the pyramid, the only chance is to find some good apps and something that is pretty useful, so that you don't need a whole staff, a bunch of people. Like during the Olympics, the New York Times made a kind of scroll kit animation for explaining some strange winter sports, and it was great. Then you see the credits for every single work. There were between 10 and 12 people working on it. So we are saying, oh my God, and that's the only thing that I can say. So if someone is developing some good apps or good software that we can use, we can also have a chance. But without this, only the big media corporation will survive.
You are right. I'm absolutely in agree with you. In Latin America, for instance, it's the same case. Like most of newsrooms don't even have enough people to try to have a developer, designer, and journalist. How can they have 10 people working on a project? There are many software online. Of course, The Guardian uses those as well for breaking news. But we try because The Guardian, I tell you, it's becoming more a development company. And it's quite scary to see, the decisions being made. Like when I started, we were 42 developers. When I left, we were 180. And in the same time, the journalists are leaving because they cannot fire journalists because there's a union, but they can ask for, voluntary redundancy. So we are increasing the development and decreasing the journalists. So how it's going to work in the future? So, and I know not every company or newspaper, especially the small ones, can do that. But if you have the will to try, for instance, there are so many tools out there that you can use. You just have to, and most of the journalists in Latin America, they are willing to give me whatever tool you have that is for free, that I can that I can learn myself, because I don't have access to the big developers. But this is starting with the will to want to use. And if you want, I can send you a list of open, free platforms where you can do data visualization in many different forms. We do, I don't know if you know, but I run a project called Chicas Poderosas together with School of Data, and we do exactly this training, not only training to do feature projects like this, like tailored by hand, and you design the app and you build it, but as well we open up for tools that are open, free, and easy to use. And you as a journalist do not have to know in-depth HTML or JavaScript, because it's pretty straightforward. You have a tutorial. If you devote a couple of hours, you will be able to do, such as Google Fusion Tables, Open Refine, which allows you to scrape data and then clean the database and then feed it into the Fusion Tables and have your data visualized. There are other libraries a little bit more sophisticated that you have to invest a little bit more time, such as D3. And again, I mentioned Infogram again. They are here represented by Nikki. She's there. And it's like new software, new tools that enable journalists to visualize their information more quickly. Most of the times, at La Nation, where I used to work lately, we had a database, and to see the trends and to see if there's something catchy out there, we would use Google Fusion Tables like this. You put the data into Fusion Tables and you visualize, and you can immediately see if there's a pattern of what happens if you match databases, you know. And these kind of tools, okay, they are not as easy as, for instance, Storyboard, that is really, really easy. Requires a bit of self-training, but if you invest that, you can reach that. And we can do everything, of course. To do a level of a snowfall, it's art piece, I would say. It's like big investment, much bigger than we do at The Guardian. It's like eventually 6 months, an helicopter to go over the mountains, you know, to film these angles. So this is another level, but still we can tell stories that are not at that level of artistic approach, but still tell a story and engage with our audiences. That's what I believe. Something else. Do you want to add something?
No, I guess the lesson I learned is that you can do it, but you won't sleep.
Yes. It's true.
She mentioned a couple of times she lost nights. Thank you so much, Mariana, for your engaging presentation and for all the tips. Again, we're taking notes. We're going to circulate all the presentations. And you'll have all the resources people mentioned. Remember that there are many tutorials online to use all these tools that Mariana mentioned. So don't be discouraged. That's the main message. Even if you don't have to sleep or you lose a couple of nights of sleep, don't be discouraged and keep pushing and keep going. So with this, we are closing our glorious first day of School of Data Journalism. We thank you all, especially those of you who sat through all the sessions and workshops and panels. We really, really appreciate your effort to learn and come here. And we know it's not easy, and you must be brain fried, and you really need a break. And we appreciate that a lot. We're very, very grateful. And we hope you learned something. We hope you'll continue practicing. And we hope we'll see most of you tomorrow. Tomorrow we start at 9. We start with a panel discussion moderated by Antoine about how to do data journalism in small rooms, in small newsrooms. So it's again going back to the same question, what do you do if you don't have all these resources? And then we'll continue in the afternoon with some more workshops. So subscribe on datadrivenjournalism.net if you haven't done so. Tweet at us your impressions from the day, and see you tomorrow. Thanks.
This. Okay, the pro is that we can have this overall picture, and the con is that we cannot actually develop further information if we are interested in these bits. And this is what print can do for you. Some people have criticized this project from being infostatic, because the human brain can better understand the size of a bar than the diameter of a circumference of a circle. But, okay, if we would show this data in pure bars, not so many people would share it, not so many people would feel excited about, let's say. This project was the most shared project at the time, and even the government of UK printed this out very big and they put it in their wall, just so they can see the overall picture. Okay, I'm missing a bit of getting more in-depth information, so how can we take this idea further? Because every year we have this issue. The cuts. So that's when another team comes, so this first project was made by the graphics team. The Guardian has 3 main teams of graphics. The graphic design team, which do breaking news, so the typical, the news, the reporter comes from the 2nd floor, goes 3rd floor, comes to design and say, please, you have 2 hours to do a graphic to go with this story. This is the typical thing. And they do it. Of course, this one was not made in 2 hours, a bit more. And then we have other things like, okay, we have 3 to 5 days to do a kind of story that is like actual, that is going to prolong along the week. Can we do something more in depth? And then there's the second team of designers, which is from 8 to 10 designers. They're called the design team. And they do everything for the web. Buttons, looks, titles. When we need sponsorship, banners, and special feature pages, etc., they do everything. And they are involved with some design for apps as well. So here we try to tag along that exact issue, which is how can we get more in-depth information about a certain category or subcategory that we want to reach. This is like the Matryoshka's dolls of Russia, you know, you open one and there's another. So this is how it works. So that's like the selling point, and it's actually very profitable. And everything started when I first joined. This was my boss called Alistair Dent, and I call him the visionary because he was, in my opinion, the one person that was driving the Guardian forward. He was really trying new technologies, new approaches, and pushing the entire team, not only the interactive team. So when I joined, it was just me and him trying to visualize databases such as WikiLeaks. That was our first project. And imagine, it was my first time in a newsroom because I was coming from advertisement. And he told me, okay, we're going to work on a project. It's very secretive. Do not tell this to anyone. And then I saw some doors with top secret, do not enter. And this Assange was walking around, but I didn't know him by the time. And I was like, oh my God, these guys are so like hysterical. So I called my mom in Portugal, because I'm Portuguese. Mommy, I'm working on this project they call WikiLeaks. I don't even know what this is. And my mom, what? Shut up, you cannot talk about that. Okay, then I realized I had to be quiet, and that was like a special story. And it was like my kicking start, so I learned like the hard way. So after that project, we were kind of fighting or a battle between us, the New York Times, and Decides. We all had access to the same data, and we had to show it and tell the story the best way possible. So it was like a, let's say, friendly combat of who would do it best. And after that project, I got asked to stay, and of course, that was my dream job, and I said yes. And then the team back in 2013 was like this. We hired 3 more developers, and we hired a journalist from the Times that was both a journalist, but he knew a lot, and he still does, about coding. And there's a question that says, should all journalists know about coding? I think the direct answer is no. They do not need to code, but they do need to know what code can make for them. So they can work with developers and have the ability to ask the developers to do certain things, such as some projects I'm going to show you. So this is the way we work. I understand that.
What? Oh, you can, if you want. Yes, yeah. We will ask. Yeah. So everybody, thanks for the people who stayed for the 3 workshops the whole afternoon. This is the 3rd workshop of the School of Data Journalism by the European Journalism Center and the Open Knowledge Foundation, and hosted by the International Journalism Festival here in Perugia. We will have now a great training session by Mariana Santos about interactive storytelling. Mariana was with ICFJ, was a fellow with ICFJ, embedded at in the great newsroom of La Nación in Costa Rica, and she's now in transition to another fellowship with the JSK fellowship. Is that right? So a great workshop in perspective. So I will leave Mariana start right now. I just remind you For those who haven't yet, register on datajournalismschool.net to get all the information about the workshops. We will email that to you afterwards if you register. And don't hesitate to share your impressions and what you learn on social media using the hashtag DDJSchool, as well as the other usual festival hashtags. Thanks, Mariana. I'll bring you a microphone.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, thank you guys for being here after such a long day. I hope I can entertain you and do not make you sleep. Thank you, School of Data, for bringing me here. It's an honor and a pleasure, and I'm so amazed to have these many people listen to me. So I was asked to run a session of 1.5 hours of visual or interactive storytelling. And to be honest with you, my goal is that you all create something, and at the end of the day, we have something to publish. But to be fair, 1.5 hours is a bit short. So I'm going to run through lots of material. Hopefully, you're going to get super injected and inspired. And I'm going to tell you about the process of animation and visual storytelling using After Effects. And thank you so much. Hello. And then, okay, hello, okay. And then I will tell you about my experience, both at The Guardian, where I used to work for the last 3 years. This last year, I've been a fellow, like he said, and I still am for the next couple of months. I finished my fellowship. Then, after this, I'm going to Fusion. It's a new TV channel in Miami that belongs to Univision, and I'm going to start a team of interactive visual storytelling, not only for TV, but for online. So the news that go on TV, they're usually linear, and they die after you show them once or twice. And the goal is, how can we repurpose these contents online and make it for users to keep on using and make it longer tail. So, can I have the presentation, please? The slides. I have a lot to tell you. Can I have the slides, please? Bambini, ragazzo. Pode andare lo slide, porfa. Grazie. Okay, it worked. So yeah, the last 3 years, I was an interactive designer at The Guardian, working with amazing developers. That they did all the magic, to be honest and fair. I love The Guardian. It's still my favorite newspaper. And, we have a chance to have very, very skilled developers and journalists. So the way it works is, okay, this is our newsroom. And it's quite beautiful. It's in the center of London, in King's Cross. It's 7 floors, but The Guardian occupies 4 floors. The first floor is like communications, admin, other projects The Guardian has, like The Guardian Jobs, Soulmate, which is one of the products that most money makes to The Guardian, which is to make couples meet online. Hopefully, with the willing that you're going to find someone as clever as you that reads The Guardian. But not every newsroom in the world has the chance to have a multidisciplinary team, but have a team of designers and a team of journalists and eventually admin people that usually are in another building and do not get involved in storytelling. So The Guardian really invests in trying to recruit developers who have a storytelling will and goal, and like they do development but with the will to tell a story with data. So it's very hard to find these people, but they are out there. And with organizations such as Hacks and Hackers and other meetups that try to combine journalists and developers, this currency starts to be more happening in more number. So let me tell you about a couple of projects. Maybe you know some of them. So the government cuts. It was a big data set, and we had to visualize it. And in London, we have the chance to have a government which actually recruits all the developers from The Guardian. So the government of London has many, many amazing developers. And they build websites to show data, to open data, and to make it available for everybody. But what happens is that if I'm a user and I want to know more about the cuts on the budget, I'm going to this site. I can download all the PDFs. But what am I going to see? What story does it tell me? Like, if I'm not a data analyst or a data expert, this is going to be full numbers and tables, quite boring and heavy. I'm not going to be able to extract the story as I would like. So I think this is the main role of journalists and designers and developers. It's how can we tell these big sets of data into stories that people that are not experts in data can still understand. This, for example, was our approach to these PDFs. So this is exactly the same content, and we divided the content in categories and subcategories. So there's like the Department of Work and Pension that has smaller departments. Here we have a overall picture, and this is something The Guardian loves. So we see that actually the blues and the reds are the ones that have the most money, and we see the small ones here that have less money to them. The pros and cons of